We've talked about Stone Blanton on the radio program here. A lot of people have followed his recruiting. He's been committed to Mississippi State for a while.
For baseball.
As a baseball player. But committed to Mississippi State for baseball.
Yeah.
He's a dual sport athlete. Linebacker, baseball player. And has been recruited by others. Ole Miss, Mississippi State has continued to recruit him on the football side of things. And there's been talk about flipping and would he stick with Mississippi State, and some people thought he would and some people thought he wouldn't. Some people thought he would end up at Ole Miss. And then last night, I don't know, you can help me with the timeline. Hey, Dad, there were people that covered Mississippi State that go, Stone Blanton's not coming to Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And then has he officially announced he's going to South Carolina?
Yeah, he committed this morning.
Okay. So officially committed now to South Carolina, where he's going to play both football and baseball.
That is correct.
And this appears to be incredibly bothersome to some. And to some, they look at it and they go, it's just a recruiting cycle.
Right.
So what's the story here?
At the end of the day, I mean, it's just pretty evident Stone Blanton didn't want to play football at Mississippi State. He committed to State in baseball before he sort of blew up as a football prospect. You know, I guess as a sophomore. And then his junior year at MRA, he had a huge year as a football player, and people started saying, okay, he's going to be a football player in college because that pays the bills, and baseball doesn't. And, you know, Ole Miss was a factor in his recruitment up until about a couple of weeks ago, and then they just sort of dropped out. And I think it's pretty evident that he just didn't want to play at Mississippi State for football for whatever reason. So he decides to go on to South Carolina and try his luck there. So I you know, there was a narrative, a long time narrative with him that he was this lifelong Mississippi State fan. It's sort of hard to buy into that now, after, you know, because I thought, you know, when we talked about his recruitment back during the summer, I was like, this is a guy I think will jump in the boat early and sort of be that guy that brings other people into the class. He just kept delaying, and it felt like for a while they're like, he just didn't want to be at Mississippi State for whatever reason. So he will head to South Carolina, and State will move on.
And Borky, on the Ole Miss side of things, there was a point in the process where he had an offer that, what a committable offer, is that what we call it?
Yeah, I mean, depending on who you believe, of course. But yeah, it sounds like there was a window where he could have been a part of the class and chose to wait, and that waiting, because this is how you're supposed to do it in recruiting, that waiting caused Ole Miss to pursue other prospects, one of which they covet more, who happened to decommit. He's a Georgia kid from Georgia Tech, and all signs are pointing to him heading towards Ole Miss. And you can't just sign every single linebacker out there. You do have to prioritize players in recruiting. And so when one wouldn't jump on the boat, metaphorically, and you have one that you covet more that seems likely to jump on said boat, you give the seat to him. And that's just kind of how this thing works. There's no gentleman in recruiting, not at the highest level. There is if you're Clay Hendricks, the head coach at Furman. But when you want to win in the SEC West, you can't be a gentleman. And when it comes down to this player I think is better than this player, therefore I want player number one. That's how this goes.
And he wasn't committed to Ole Miss at any point.
So,
right.
So this isn't, you know, sort of what happened last year with McKalen Pounders, where, you know, you had the, I'll be generous and say there were some cross wires there, but I don't think we all know that's not the case. And he was never committed to Ole Miss. So if Ole Miss wanted to put him on the clock, they are well within their rights to do so. And it worked out for them. They're going to get a higher rated player as a result for it. For State, they felt like they had him in the boat, and so as a result, you know, not going to be able to go out and probably bring in another linebacker in at this late date of the same caliber. They're expected to flip a kid who is committed to Tulane, who, if you look at, depending on where you look for ratings, is rated the same as Stone Blanton, but we you know, we know what's going on there. So, yeah. So for State, they're just sort of left holding the bag. It's just a recruiting battle that they lost at the end of the day.
In the 24/7 composite rankings, Stone Blanton has 4 stars. In the 24/7 sports standalone rankings, he's listed as a 3-star. We got a message, somebody asking us if we had any confirmed height and weight. I mean, I haven't measured him.
I haven't gotten out there with a tape measure or a scale, no.
6'2", 220 is what he's listed on his recruiting profile.
Sure.
How big a deal is this for Mississippi State?
For State, I mean, they already had a couple of really good linebackers committed. They had a couple of good linebackers from last year's class in John Lewis and Ty Cooper that redshirted this year. So, I mean, that linebacker room is in good shape. Blanton was not a must-have. He doesn't make or break the class. But you would have liked to have had him. You know, you recruited him hard, so it's definitely a miss. You know, I'd be interested to talk to Lamonis, to be honest. Obviously, he can't say much, but how big a miss was this for baseball? That's what I would like to know. If he was committed as a sophomore to Mississippi State, he must be a really good baseball player. So, how much does it damage you there?
One thing too, I think that's important to point out. These players are rarely fans of a college team. Some of them are. You have guys that grow up going to Oxford for Ole Miss games, grow up going to Starkville for state games, and that's what they want to play. And when they get the chance, they go play. We have seen that happen before. But that's not all that common. Recruiting is all about relationships. It's not about fanhood. I'd be willing to bet when people say, oh, this kid grew up a Mississippi State fan, well, he's not going to Mississippi State. Clearly didn't care about them that much. And that is not a shot at State or the player. That is kind of how this goes usually. High school football players, in a general sense, don't have a favorite college team. Some they do. I mean, some guys grow up in Birmingham, want to go to Alabama. That does happen. Guys grow up in Jackson, want to go to Ole Miss, want to go to State. That does happen. But every player in your class, not a fan of your school.
Look at Arch Manning. I mean, there's no way Arch Manning didn't grow up an Ole Miss fan. But that doesn't just mean he's going to go to Ole Miss. He might, but he is definitely not going to let his, the
Peyton
team he cheered for as
grew
a
up
kid.
As an Ole Miss fan.
Yeah, Peyton Manning. Yeah, you have a real live example there. So, they're not you. They're not me. If I had been blessed to have that ability, my recruitment would have been a very short one. I would have committed to Mississippi State and played my college football there happily. I'm sure Richard Cross, quarterback of the Oxford Heights, would have been the hometown hero if he had, if you were a D1 quarterback. But we weren't. And these kids,
I think the simple answer to that is yes.
Mm-hmm.
But being a D1 quarterback and being the most highly coveted quarterback in the entire country with 5 stars next to your name, maybe that's different.
It's a little different.
Maybe
it's probably a little different.
I mean, I kind of.
And he didn't grow up in Oxford. I mean, he kind of did. He's probably there a lot of weekends, but there's a difference when you grow up, when you live in Oxford, when you live even in Mississippi, and you live in New Orleans.
You're right. But I guess the point that I made, you say it would have been open and shut for you, and you would have gone to Mississippi State, and you would have been very happy doing so. And I think probably in that scenario, growing up in Oxford, playing at Oxford High School, had the opportunity presented itself, I probably would have gone to Ole Miss. But if I had also been recruited by, at the time, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia, and whomever else, probably would cause you to think about it.
I'd visit. Get to meet the hostesses.
Okay. We get a message here that says Will Rogers grew up an Ole Miss fan.
He did. 100% did.
They just don't care about it the way you guys do. They just don't care about it like you do.
Yeah. And there are some, and like Will Rogers now probably cares about it, he'll continue that throughout his life. But when you got to make that decision, you got to make the decision that's best for you.